All right, so my name is Joan Pierce, and the purpose of my presentation tonight is to explain to you some of the concepts and philosophies that I relied on as the president of the New England Society of Botanical Artists. And I was honored to be elected president of this organization in December of 2015, and I served for 2 years until December of 2017. At NESBA, if you don't know, the organization is a very dynamic organization, lots of energy, lots of creativity, and some very strong-willed members. Being the president is difficult, let me tell you. However, I'm not here to tell you about the difficulties. I'm here to tell you about some of the things that helped me deal with being the presidency. The New England Society of Botanical Artists they have a long mission statement. So I'm just going to read to you one sentence. The New England Society of Botanical Artists works to promote public appreciation of the art and science of botanical art and illustration in New England. Through its art, NESBA emphasizes New England plant diversity and its preservation. Now, Suellen, in getting us to make a presentation, said there are 3 important things that you have to remember. One is to have some humor. The other is to include a personal element. And the third is that you need to have 3 stories. So I'm going to start with story number 1. And there is a fairly long introduction in this part of my talk. This is the most important. So I'm going to be telling you the philosophies that I used and ideas, again, in helping me deal with being the presidency of this organization. And it starts with, in 2013, I was driving home on a Sunday evening. It was dark. It was probably in the fall. And I was listening to the radio. And as I was driving down the street, I became aware that on the radio was a program. It was a public radio station. And there was an MC introducing a speaker. And the audience was something like the Boston Chamber of Commerce. This was a business group, high-level business group. And the speaker who was being introduced was a woman by the name of Joan Chang. I'd never heard of her at the time, but I since have seen a number of articles about her. Joanne, as the person introducing her explained, was a mathematician by training. She had been in the investment business for a number of years, and she finally got fed up with it, decided to follow her heart, and invested all of her savings in and bought a bakery because she really wanted to be a baker. So in spite of all of her intelligence and drive, the first year of running this bakery she felt was practically a disaster, and she almost quit. She would go home every night in tears. She didn't know what to do. Finally, she did, at the suggestion of a good friend who ultimately became her husband, Christopher Myers, she did some real soul searching. And she came up with these guiding principles or philosophies for running her business. And the reason this is so important, and I want to get this across to you, is that these philosophies are not about economics. They are about the human element of running a business. And this is why these philosophies can be something that any of us can bring to our life in other organizations or dealing with family or colleagues. That here is this woman who is a mathematician by training, has worked in the investment world, and her philosophies, she never mentions the bottom line. She never mentions, oh, I reviewed my metrics and came up with a different approach. She never talks about profits or profit margins or increasing the third quarter returns. This is all about looking at human interaction and the human element of running a business. Herself, her employees, and her customers. And I found this fascinating. When she started, she bought one bakery. By the time she was invited to be the speaker, by that time she had expanded to 4 locations of the bakery, Flour Bakery. And she was also, with her husband, co-owning, running a restaurant called Myers and Chang, which is in Chinatown. and the 4 bakeries were just going gangbusters. At the time of this radio program, this will take more than 8 minutes. At the time of this, as I turned down my street and I was listening to her, and again, I'd never heard of her. I'm not an entrepreneur by any means. Her voice was so clear and so calm and so confident that I really enjoyed listening to her, and it became apparent that she had something to say. I turned into my driveway, I shut the engine off, and I sat there almost in the pitch black listening to her until I then turned on the dome light in my little car, and I grabbed the only thing I had to write on, which was this very same file folder, and I know it was in 2013 because there it says 2013, and this is a file folder that I had been using as treasurer when I was treasurer of NESBA. And I grabbed a pen and I just started writing as fast as I could to keep up with her. And so these are my notes. And I read them over again and then put them away. And then when I became president 2 years later, I was cleaning out my treasurer stuff because now it was somebody else's turn. And, oh, look at this. And I started reading it again. I thought, yeah, these are some ideas that are really going to help me as president. So this is where it comes from and what I want to tell you about tonight. So I've asked Deborah to please step forward, and we're going to just run through this list. But again, I want to emphasize that Joanne, while she was talking about her very much for-profit business, the guiding principles are about the human aspect of her business. And when she started seriously evaluating the human part of it, her business flourished. So, we're going to just go through some of them. And the first one is, well, actually, I have a copy in front of me. What she decided to do was write a vision statement for each location. In this case, she started with the 1 bakery. Very, very specific for that particular year. What was her vision for the bakery? And she went into great length to the audience in front of her of exactly what this vision statement was. We don't do this in NESBA, but I could see how it would benefit us if we did. But she talked about what the ambiance should be like in the bakery, what should it smell like when the customer comes in, what the food should look like, what type of experience would the workers have and the customers, and she took great care to explain all of this to her audience. Then number 2, she said, you give that written vision statement to all of your employees. You have to communicate. If the employees don't know your vision, they can't make it happen. So then the third one is, let me see what I finally wrote. Okay, she again places great emphasis on the human element of running her business. By that time, she probably had, I think she said 100 employees. She knew every single employee's name, what their job was, and when she would make the rounds of the 4 bakeries, at least once every single week, she'd go to each location, and she would speak to every single employee and ask them, what kind of problems are you having? How can I help you? She said, if you don't know what your employees are doing, you don't know how your business is doing. And this is something that I would like to credit Nancy Savage, who is the current president of NESBA. When I have a NESBA activity, I get an email from Nancy. So how did demo day go? You know, how many people were there? How was the Blanche Ames opening reception? Did you have a good time? She stays in touch and finds out what kind of problems people are doing. I give her a great deal of credit for that because it wasn't something that I did. But so number 4, and it's really about confidence, and don't think that somebody else can solve a problem better than you. Now, when Joanne was talking about this, she didn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I do now because it helps me stay in track of things. Keep track. Name the elephant, face the conflict head on. I like to run away from interpersonal conflict, but I found that with NESBA, for the good of the organization, I didn't have a choice. again, there are some very strong-willed people in this organization, and you have to deal with them. And at work, I'm too old to be that reliant on email. If there's a problem, I pick up the phone and I call. And that's how we work things out. Be someone who can be trusted, someone that the employees can go to. Surround yourself with believers and with people who have perspective on things. That's the importance of a good board of directors and of developing a well-informed membership who feel connected to the organization. Now you see number 8 there has an asterisk because Joanne talked about a particular philosophy just in this order, but I'm taking number 8 out of order and putting it at the end because I think it's the most important. So then we skip to number 9, the Blue Dot Philosophy by Carl Sagan, where he says, in all of this vastness, and there was a photograph of Earth that was taken from 3.5 billion miles away by Voyager 1. It is this mote of dust. And he talks about in all of this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. Get a real perspective is basically what this is. And so, so that my first story was talking about driving and sitting in my car and writing down my notes. My story number 2 is one of the first phone calls I made when I became president was to Carolyn Payzant, who lives up in New Hampshire. She was a founding director of NESBA, and she said much the same thing to me when I became president, and I often thought about it when I was about to get angry with someone. She said, we're just a little art organization and no one really cares what we do. And it was so, there's my humor, thank you, Suellen. And I think, yeah, just step back, sleep on it, deal with it tomorrow, but deal with it. Don't run away from it. But it's true. And so then for Joanne's number 10, it was take on a challenge, take a risk. Why not? But number 8, which I considered to be the most important, and that's why I put it last, not because it's the least, but because it's the most, is be grateful. People like to be appreciated, and people like to help people who are grateful. Say thank you. And this is now my story number 3, where Pam Harrington, our membership chair, and some other NESBA members have done a survey recently. And one of the things that came out was that volunteers, some members would volunteer, and then they wouldn't feel like anybody appreciated, and then they wouldn't volunteer again. And I have to tell you, truthfully, when I first became active in NESBA, someone asked me to be the hospitality chair. And that's the person who brings the cookies and the coffee. And when you're the hospitality chair, you get to choose what we eat for the meeting. And then you get to take the leftovers home. So that's what I did for 4 years. And almost invariably, at some point after the board meeting, someone would go, and let's give Joan a round of applause for bringing such great refreshments. And everyone would clap and they would cheer, and it was a lot of fun. When I became president, I have to tell you, I got more thank yous as hospitality chair than I ever did for president. It was just silence at the end of a meeting. And sometimes someone would come up and they'd say, oh, Joan, you ran a really good meeting, but it didn't happen very often. So this is, again, be grateful. This is something that you can take with you into the workplace, but you can also use it at home or with other organizations or with colleagues. So those are the philosophies from Joanne Chang. Thank you very much. Deborah, you did a great job. And now I just have a couple of quick comments. A couple of other philosophies that I already had, but I just want to, and I'm almost done, is what you say about someone says more about you than it does about them. And so I'm very careful I don't talk about people. And this is another one that I use a lot when I negotiate with people. The fastest way to get someone to agree with you when you have a difference of opinion is to see things from their point of view. And I use that a lot. Suellen had mentioned this. people, employees or members, voters, are looking to the leaders to be uplifting and enthusiastic. Lead and persuade by enthusiasm, by being positive. So I view NESBA's mission statement is not this long 2-paragraph thing, but I see NESBA's mission statement as simply to make the world a better place with botanical art. When we have an exhibit such as the Boston Flower Show, I view that as community service. When I'm there doing my stint on the Saturday evening graveyard shift that nobody else wants, but I think it is the most fantastic one in the whole world, I will bring in a couple of extra chairs. People who come through and they're burdened with their packages and they're just inundated with all the commercialism and everyone trying to, sell them things. So have a seat. And they stop and they say, oh, thank you. And they start to tell you about their troubles and how they feel about the NESBA exhibit being such an oasis of peace and calm, and it's a wonderful feeling. So in keeping with Joanne's tenet number 8 about being grateful, I would like to say thank you to all of you, to Brian for giving me this opportunity to spread the word, and Suellen for having us do this and for going through with this. And despite all of the difficulties that you had, you persevered until it finally happened. So thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts to make the world a better place through botanical art. Thank you. Next. Thank you.